Finding the best 35mm lens for Sony E-mount is something I've spent quite a bit of time on over the last couple of years. I have several videos comparing the different options, and I have a lot of experience with the offerings from Zeiss and Sigma in this category as well. But once Sony released their 35mm f1.8, I felt like the search was over. We had a good lens at a great price. But apparently Sony didn't think so because they just launched their 35mm f1.4 G Master, and today we're going to see if it's worth the extra money over the 1.8. Let's get undone. What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and for the first time ever, there is no intro. Okay, as usual, some disclosure. Sony lent me this lens to make this video. I did not get to keep it, no money changed hands, and Sony does not get creative input on this video or get to see it before it's published. This video does have a sponsor though, and that's Storyblocks. So let me start off by saying that this lens is excellent. In terms of overall quality, it's the best 35mm lens available for Sony E-mount. However, it costs nearly twice as much as the f1.8 version. More if you live in Canada, actually. And depending on your purpose, it might not offer you that compelling of an upgrade. Oh, and the reason why I'm pointing to the box for the f1.8 and not the lens itself is because I'm actually using it to shoot this video. I've been using it for quite a while to shoot my YouTube videos. But while we're talking about boxes, let me show you what's included with the G Master. So I just have kind of like a unmarked box here, but inside you get a soft case. In the case you get a little strap for the case, and it's reasonably well padded and nice. And then you get a somewhat shallow lens hood that doesn't have the leaflet design. It's flat across the top, but it does have a push button release. So nothing too fancy, but you get what you need. Now for me, the biggest advantage the G Master has over the f1.8 lens is the form factor. Something I complained about when I reviewed the 1.8 originally was that I found it a bit small and not as comfortable in my hands when paired with one of the larger Sony bodies. In fact, when Sony released their 20mm f1.8, I said that I wished the 35mm version was built like the 20mm. Well, in a sense, now it is, making the 20mm, the 24-1.4, and the 35mm G Master all using a very similar design, feel, and layout, including the same filter thread size for all three lenses as well. And that's great. It makes life easy when your primes have a similar form and compatibility, especially considering these lenses use the much more common 67mm filters, where the 35-1.8 uses the 55mm, which can be annoying at times. And I really like the way this 35mm feels in the hand. I weighed it at 550 grams with the caps on, which is a noticeable step up from the f1.8's 300 grams, but it still falls well below the Zeiss Distagon or that extended Sigma Art lens, and the weight is distributed nicely and doesn't feel as front heavy as those lenses. Both lenses are weather sealed, this and the 1.8 version, to some degree. I'm not sure how much better the G Master is here. I imagine it got Sony's best sealing, where I would suggest that the f1.8 lens is merely adequately sealed. It has an AF/MF selector switch, a function button, and a declickable aperture ring, but the aperture range is different than the f1.8 version. Obviously it opens up to f1.4 instead of 1.8, but on the narrow end it only closes down to f16, where the 1.8 version goes all the way down to 22. This does have an impact on your ability to make sun stars, so if that's something that you're really into, perhaps you'll prefer the 1.8 version, but it's still possible at f16, of course. The focus ring is well dampened and offers a nearly 160-degree linear focus throw that allows for smooth, repeatable manual focus pulls. By measurements, it does appear to have a slightly longer throw than the f1.8 as well, and it's easy to accomplish this because the focus ring has a larger circumference and rests in a better position in the hand. However, the 35 f1.8 is still the best choice for video shooters who like to pull focus manually between these two because of focus breathing. The f1.8 barely breathes at all, but sadly the G Master has quite pronounced breathing, which is a little unfortunate because honestly, if it wasn't for that, this lens would be essentially perfect. Of course, for photography, this won't really be an issue, or even if you use a more rapid autofocus method of shooting video, and as expected, the autofocus performs excellently on this lens. It features the best linear focusing motors that Sony has to offer, and produces very smooth, fast, and uniform results, with an operation that's essentially silent. However, it's worth noting that in my testing, I didn't really find the f1.8 lens to be any worse. That isn't saying anything bad about the G Master, it's more suggesting that the f1.8 is good enough in the autofocus department and delivers impressive results for the money. The 35 f1.8 also has a closer minimum focusing distance of 0.22 meters or 0.73 feet versus the 0.27 meters or 0.89 feet on the G Master. Not a huge difference, but there is one. And I wouldn't call the magnification particularly great on the G Master. Here's an image of a ruler as close as possible, and you can see the framing still feels pretty loose. If you're into astrophotography though, the G Master features the same excellent coma reducing attributes of the 24mm G Master, making it great for capturing stars with fewer aberrations. And it's the same price as the 24mm, giving you two great options for that. And in fact, fewer aberrations is kind of the name of the game with this new lens. Here, let me show you some test images. And while I get everything running here, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Storyblocks. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you could really use some footage, but maybe it's January in London, Canada, and outside is dark and slushy and covered in dirty snow and broken branches, and you have a lens to test? Well, Storyblocks can probably help you out with footage from much nicer looking places, as well as a massive catalog of other stock video clips, backgrounds, overlays, and After Effects templates. The interface is easy to use and navigate, and the clips are royalty-free for both personal and commercial use, so you can use them as much as you want, wherever you want. So if you think you could take advantage of a fantastic library of quality stock footage and effects, check out Storyblocks using the link in the description below. So as I just alluded to, there wasn't really anything nice to shoot, and we're on lockdown here in London, but I did my best to get some test shots that I think highlight the strengths of this lens. Okay, and one thing I should let you know is that I shot all of these on the, well, most of them on the A7R4, so we're getting like 61 megapixels, so we can really look at the differences in terms of resolving power with these lenses. And then you'll feel comfortable too to know that this lens will work on a really high megapixel camera. Also, something I didn't really script here, but I wanted to mention is that I'm not really doing a comparison against the Zeiss Distagon or the Sigma Art lens, but as I'll show you here, this G Master lens is superior optically to both of those, and also has sort of like fewer quirks. Like the Sigma Art lens, you know, has the MC11 built onto it, and it's kind of long and front heavy. I like that lens, but that is an issue. And it also has sort of like an older feel. The Distagon has like some quality control issues and decentering issues, and feels a little bit dated. There's that Zeiss like pancake lens, which became completely superfluous after the 35-1.8 came out. Anyway, so I've tested them all. Like I said, I have those other videos. In my opinion, the 35-1.8 was the way to go for Sony. So that's why we're comparing it to this. But when I'm going to show you these images now, and you'll see just how good optically the G Master is. Okay, so let's start off with a little sharpness test of both the G Master and the 1.8 wide open for comparison's sake. And keep in mind, I really like the 1.8, by the way. So when you see these, I'm not like, the 1.8's good. This is how much better the G Master is. So we'll punch in here. Okay, so first up we can see right away, the G Master's on the left, that it has sort of a better contrast right out the gate. But also there is more fringing on the 1.8 on the right. And this is 1.4 versus 1.8, both wide open. And if we go and jump over, look up some details more on the side, it's clear how much sharper the G Master is to the 1.8. And we can even punch in more and really see the difference here. And this is to show you where that is in the image. That's over here, that's on the edge. If we go to the extreme corner, then again, the 1.4 is doing really well wide open. But also there's a coloring benefit that I quite like. Let's punch it a little bit. The G Master, not that there's anything wrong again with the 1.8, the 1.8 is good, but the G Master is producing slightly richer, a little bit more saturated, a little bit more, I don't know, accurate, vibrant, contrasty colors. It's pulling more out of the image, a little bit more. You can see that on the Polaroid box, you can see that here on the color checker, as well as just overall the details are a bit better. And again, like this is much sharper than this, especially look at the flash cube here. And what's interesting is that it doesn't really like stopping down the difference. In fact, I'll show you something interesting here. Let's change the image on the right from 1.8 to 2.8. So now it's 1.4 on the G Master versus 2.8 on the 1.8. And not only is it still just as sharp, like maybe they're more even in the middle now. Again, still the fringing isn't as good on, like the f1.8 still suffers from a bit of fringing. And if we go and look at some of those edges again, the 1.4 is still sharper and better detail at 1.4 than the 1.8 is at 2.8. And that's pretty crazy. So basically the whole image is just, you're getting a stellar image from edge to edge. Here's a little comparison for chromatic aberration. G Master's on the left. You can see again that even at 1.4, it has less fringing and it's a more, you know, pure image than the 1.8 on the right. Does really well there. And if you stop them both down to 1.8, again, the G Master on the left is just better here when shooting at the same aperture. Okay, I've got a few more sort of like practical versions of the same kind of information here. So here is a little chromatic aberration evaluation that we can make, and you can see, and most of these shots are all wide open just to test it. And you can see that there's really nothing going on in the image here at any point at the different depths. Same with I did, you know, your classic fence shot. Let me pull out a little bit. And same thing. There's no issues anywhere, and it is very, very, very sharp. This is like 600%. It's great. There's really nothing to complain about. I'm just trying to show you, you know, some samples. What do we got here? Brick wall. Looks great all the way across. You can see a little bit of vignetting here, and I can give you a quick sense of, there's not correct lens correction profiles in Lightroom yet, but obviously the camera has built-in lens corrections. But if I wanted to give you like sort of a rough sense, I'll put on a different 35mm profile. So this one's overcorrecting. So maybe let's not look at the distortion and instead just look at the vignetting difference, so there is a bit of vignetting at 1.4, but it's not too bad, and it's very smooth, and I don't find it to be completely bothersome. Most of the time I've been evaluating these images without the lens corrections on, and they've been quite good. And again, we can just have a look at the center sharpness there, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how sharp this lens is. The sharpest 35, maybe I've seen on any platform, but definitely the sharpest I've seen for Sony E. And then I just did a couple like close-up shots so we can try and see how, you know, how the transitions to out-of-focus areas look. And of course, they're very smooth. Everything looks really nice in my opinion. And I took some shots, I think this is an example of one, to show you some of the character of some of the, you know, out of focus orbs when you're doing like some close-up like little details that you might see in like a landscape. And they have some fun character. They're mostly flawless. I'll show you some bigger bokeh in a second. But nice little character in there, but without being distracting. Just nice and pleasing for the small little details there. What else do we got? Again, smooth transitions to in and out of focus. I would never shoot this at 1.4, like it's a slice, but I think it shows something here. And then this one I just put in here because I thought it really showed, again, the detail, but also just the general contrast of this lens. It does really well. There's like ice and different lighting hitting things, and the image just is very punchy, just right out of camera. And again, look at the detail here. It's crazy. And I just did like a weird sort of architecture shot so you can see what the lines look like when you're wide open at 35-1.4. Again, not the most interesting images. I don't really like any of them, but hopefully they kind of showed off. From my experience with the lens, I have no issues with it other than the focus breathing thing. Another thing I noticed is that the f1.8 G Master doesn't seem to be quite 2/3 of a stop brighter than the 1.8. I was getting more like half a stop in that T1.5 to 1.6 range in terms of light transmission. Or maybe the f1.8 lens is actually transmitting better than f1.8. All I know is that it's not quite 2/3 of a stop difference, which suggests yet again just how good of a value the f1.8 lens is. But there is a difference in the size of the out-of-focus orbs in the shot. The G Master is slightly better here. But I would argue that the actual quality of the bokeh is somewhat similar. No real complaints with either. Both are excellent with very few imperfections and just minor cat-eyeing in the corners. The main difference is the f1.4 is shallower. I don't have a lot of human samples to show you for the reasons I previously mentioned, although I did shoot my last video with this lens. I don't know what I'm pointing at. I was very pleased with the result. The image looked great and the autofocus was flawless. Actually, hang on, I have an idea. All right, so I wanted to get you on here because I assumed that you probably shot some human subjects. What do you think of the image that you got out of it for, you know, shooting some people?
I shot my wife, we went to a bed and breakfast. Why not? 35-1.4 and the new 35-1.4 GM. So I noticed better color out of camera in my raw file. I am noticing a richer color, especially in the skin tone, and that is obviously very important to me. I'm also getting better autofocus, better hit rate.
Did you do like pixel peeping between the G Master? Like, do you find it sharper, the same sharpness? What do you think compared to the Distagon?
I shot with the A7R3 just so I can pixel peep. Yeah, noticeably sharper. The rendering, just something about the way the image looks, it's very pleasing. This is the best 35 that Sony makes right now.
I don't want you to do too much more because I'm assuming you're posting the video.
Yeah, but no one's gonna watch it, so I might as well just tell them here.
Well, go watch. Well, I'm telling my audience right now to go watch your video. All right, thanks, Manny.
All right, dude. Later, man.
The G Master is noticeably better than the f1.8 when it comes to flare control, though. I wouldn't call the f1.8 bad, but the G Master definitely demonstrates better control and is very impressive. I had to use a flashlight just to trigger it because outside I was actually having a very difficult time even creating flare in this lens, which is nice because it guarantees great contrast in most scenarios. All right, so where does that leave us? Well, this new lens from Sony is fantastic. It's easily one of the sharpest 35mm lenses I've ever seen, and it has stellar control over chromatic aberration and flare with very pleasing bokeh. It's essentially perfect, save for the unfortunate focus breathing. So if you've got the money and that's all you needed to know, then go ahead and buy this lens and feel confident in your choice. However, if you're more video focused and need that focus breathing reduced, or if you just really want to get the best bang for your buck and you're willing to tolerate softer corners and a bit more fringing, the 35 f1.8 is still the best value 35mm option on the Sony system and is an excellent little lens. I probably wouldn't upgrade to the G Master if I shot video and already had the f1.8 version, but if you're a photographer looking for the best 35mm lens you can get for your Sony camera, this new G Master is it. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video entertaining, or at least helpful. And if you did, make sure you leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, try setting the playback speed to 75%. Yeah, all right. I'm done.